Hello, Worlds Isos here. We're bringing you the last, for now, weapon guide for the Maker, with that being the Fury's Edge. So, the Fury's Edge was one of the starter weapons, obviously introduced at the start of the game because of that. It is a melee weapon, one of the fastest attack speeds in the game, but for Too Long Didn't Watch, it is it basically does everything a Sledgeblade would, but is always slightly worse at it. But it can deflect projectiles, which doesn't mean very much currently, except that it can hard counter Boltshots very well. There are a couple other like niche cases, but it's not like most of those are pretty easily dodgeable, unfortunately. So anyway, let's go straight into the overview. Okay, for overview. So the Fury's Edge starts with a 1 second swing delay, which is very fast, one of the fastest in the like swing delay and reload delay are pretty much equivalent as is cooldown, and the there is one faster. It is the Falconic Plasma Bow, but obviously it has a really bad damage type. This has a slightly better damage type, but meaning that it can technically destroy everything. You just need to hit guards in the right spot if they're armored. But yeah, starting at 1 and it comes down to 0.8, getting +1 at each level. Not super exciting for level ups, but like even small boosts to swing delay like that are really impactful when you're already fairly fast. It has a lunge range of 4.5 meters. This is not very far. Like, that means that you can just be outside of the square that they're in and lunge at something. It has a lunge speed of 15 meters per second, same as the Sledge Blade. Its damage type is breaking, which means it can hurt flesh or traps, but not armor. So if you hit armor, you will actually get a animation as you bounce off of it, which is not great because that means that you can potentially get killed in that animation, which you don't really want to do. And it's the only weapon currently with the breaking damage type, which is unfortunate. It also is the only weapon with a trait. This trait is called Deflect Projectiles. This is what makes it so good against Boltshots, but also has some marginal use against Ravagers, Enforcers, Plasma Sentinels, and there was one more, I'm pretty sure. Plasma Sentinels, Boltshots, Enforcers. Oh, Hornets. Hornets is the last one. They're the only things that actually technically use projectiles, and that's the only thing Deflects Projectiles actually triggers off of. For more information on that, we'll go look at the parry guide that I've got put up previously, but we'll go into more details on the deflect projectiles, what that actually does when we get into the basics, which we'll go to about now, actually. Okay, so for the basics, with a melee weapon equipped, even if it's not your current melee weapon, it will show a lunge indicator if you get too close. Now, you can see that as the UI here. If I swap over to the sword, you can see that as I get point at the trap, the sword gets lifted up, but also the reticule goes red. Now, as for the deflect projectiles trait, we can see that in action by stepping in front of this and swinging at the bolts. So you'll notice that I didn't just hit the ones like directly I was aiming at, I hit kind of everything around me a little bit. It has like a semicircle that's in front of you that it hits. It actually hits quite far out to the sides as well, but not behind you. Though you can walk forward to move into it. As for the lunge itself, right click to lunge in. You'll notice that because it's 4.5 meters, it's actually a little bit further than the Impaler. So I can do that. And you can also do unlock attacks, which you do by targeting something that isn't lunging and then swinging your sword onto the hitbox. That was a lunge. It's much harder to do with the Fury's Edge because the animation is quite fast. but this allows you to not move forward and still get your swing off. So that's it for the basics. Let's go into some of the edge cases that I can actually help with. Specifically, let's start with relentless bolt shots. Okay, so before we go and look at the actual relentless bolt shot and parry them, I just want to quickly look at the pattern of the bolt shots here. So each of these little divots on the bolt shot is a projectile that will get fired out by the relentless. It gets fired out by the regular as well, but they're at different times. So you'll notice that that on the very left there's 3. Then as you get closer to the center, there's 3 more, and then in the actual center there's only 2. This is actually a very good thing for dealing with these because it means that you can actually deal with less on, particularly on the hunter bolt shots where each of these fires independently and tracks separately. It's also useful when dealing with the regular relentless bolt shots, though I do find it typically easier, and I mentioned this in the parry guide, to go to either the left or rightmost and only parry the first of these two that, or these two that go to hit you, because they get fired pretty much right next to one another. It goes something like this, but that was a spiral, in case you weren't paying attention or couldn't see it. Yeah, so you can generally hit both of these if you're on the left or right, but I think it might be easier, specifically for the hunter bolt shots, to learn how to parry the center ones. Okay, so we've got a relentless bolt shot in front of us. I'm standing roughly in the center, and we are at a fairly long range. This is 1 away from when it would actually start firing. The reason I am at this range is because at this range, the top one has fallen far enough to actually be able to kill me, but the bottom one is still a threat as well. So one of the best tricks for dealing with a relentless bolt shot, if you want to go down the center, you can just, as I said, you can go down the left or right, and you can just parry the one that's about to hit you. And with relentless bolt shots, you want to make sure that you're only parrying ones that are going to hit you. Don't parry anything else, or you will die. Because you won't have the Fury's Edge back up for that. But anyway, in this case, what you do is you approach fairly quickly, parry the one that's going to hit you, and you survive that. Next up we have a Hunter Bolt Shot, which is around this corner. So Hunter Bolt Shots are a little bit different. They will aim at your feet. They'll center the shots at your feet, and as each one fires, they'll recalculate where they should be shooting. So if you move, you'll end up with the arrows being redirected to where you currently are rather than where you were when you started. Now, to deal with this, you could stand still, in which case, instead of aiming for the lowest of the center bolts, you would want to aim for the top one, because the lowest one will hit the ground at your feet, because it's being aimed down a bit, because the center is your feet, and so it's below that, so it's going to hit the ground below your feet. The high one, however, is going to hit you because it's coming down a little bit and is aiming, because the center is at it's centered on your feet and you're above where your feet are. What you can do, however, so that you're not as vulnerable, is continually move forward, bunny hop over the low one and parry the top one, which I will do now. Allowing you to parry a relentless bolt shot fairly safely and continue moving. So that is how you parry relentless bolt shots. So there are 2 armored guards that have armor on both their legs and torso, which makes it harder to hit them. You have to go for the head from the front. With the Warmonger, you can jump over it and get it in the back, but that's not always an option. If you're in like a halfway corridor, you may not actually be able to jump over it, even if you manage to bait out the attack. And there might be reasons why you can't bait out the attack safely. But let's not go into that just yet. What I'm going to show you is a trick to try and kill them from the front, which is if you get really close to them, as they're swinging, they raise both their hands and head upwards, which allows you to just like point up, swing, and you'll often get the kill. I wouldn't generally recommend this if you can get behind, if you can jump and get behind them. That's so much safer. It's probably a better way to go about it. But this is a trick that can work, and it only really works because of the high speed of the Fury's Edge. And I failed. There, cool. It's not easy to do consistently. I recommend holding A or D, or left or right, while you're doing it, so that if you do mess it up and there is a little bit of space, you might be able to actually dodge the actual attack like I did there. But yeah, you aim up and swing, and you can get the kill that way. So Cannonbacks are a little bit different here. They don't actually have any real weak spots on the front besides the head, and the head is hard to aim for. So there's not really a lot you can do. If they are in a situation where, like this, where they're on the ground, one of the best ways to actually deal with them is to use their own attack and just ignore the fact that you're using Fury's Edge. Alternatively, if they are on a spot where you can't, just take the time to aim for their head, because if they're not able to be hit by their own bombs, if you stand right next to them, they won't be able to be hit by you either. So they won't. If you stand right next to them, they won't hit you either. Ideally you want to get behind them, but if they've already aggroed on you, there's no delay in their attack that would allow them to be. Uh, yeah, there's no delay in their attack that allows you to easily deal with them. If I would, yeah, choose your way of dealing with them. If they've already aggroed, try and get their bombs on top of them and to kill them. If they haven't already aggroed, backstab them. If they have already aggroed them and you can't get their bombs to land on them because they're on like a slope or something, just stand next to them, aim for their head, and swing at it. You'll get it. You'll have to take your time and actually line up the shot. It's going to require you to stand still. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be fun to deal with armored cannonbacks with the Fury's Edge. Generally speaking, use your other weapon. For Fury's Edge, for weapon loadouts, I recommend two different weapons to pair with Fury's Edge. Dual Sword and Volt Lancer. I think the Volt Lancer one is better, so the starter loadout. Volt Lancer and Fury's Edge. Volt Lancer is probably the most like complete weapon in the game. It doesn't need a lot of support, which means that it generally wants you to go in for defensive options, and Fury's Edge is not the best defensive options. It does hard counter Boltshots, which is nice, but is bad against a lot of other things, particularly bombs. But this combination allows you to save a little bit of ammo on things that are close by using the Fury's Edge, potentially trigger Frenzy if you decide to go that route, and generally just take advantage of the Volt Lancer quite well. And I think that's fine. You can also put it with the Sledge Blade. I think this is a reasonably good loadout. It's not the best. It has some difficulty with certain situations, and there's a lot of like tricks you need to learn to really get good use out of dual sword, because there's no defense on that when melee players probably need defense the most. It is, well, not no defense, so you can still counter bolt shots. Uh, I do think it's a very good, it's a fairly good loadout though, because it can handle just about everything, despite the fact that I don't really think that either of these weapons are the best in the game, either individually or combined. You could also I wouldn't recommend pairing it with the plasma bow at all. Um, they handle a lot of similar cases, but it's just that the you will just have too much issues with certain trap setups, and that will become an issue. Arc Barrier becomes a like full speed runner shenanigan. You are definitely speedrunning with that, and you are not necessarily going to be getting the best times despite that, because the combination of these two can't handle even some like moderately complex trap setups particularly well, and that eats into your time, which makes it harder. And yeah, it's I wouldn't generally recommend it, even if you are looking to learn speedrunning. The it's just kind of a choice that people make because of the fact that it's effectively the two defensive options in the game. Demo Cannon and Fury's Edge, I think, is a use case. I don't think it's the best use of the Demo Cannon. I don't think any of these are really the best case, except maybe the Sledge Blade one, the dual sword, could maybe be the best because the problems that Sledge Blade has kind of line up with what the Fury's Edge is able to do, and there's nothing that lines up a little bit better. But the Demo Cannon doesn't need another weapon in its other slot generally because it can handle things with armor in one shot, and the only problems are roof traps and like high roof traps and the occasionally hornets, but you can deal with them. It's a pain, and the Fury's Edge is not really the best option for dealing with either of those. So yeah, I would stick with Sledge Blade or Volt Lancer for pairing with Fury's Edge. As for perks, not perks, biolinks, the Kamatachi is the only one that has biolinks that currently affects the Fury's Edge. Frenzy is probably the best biolink to link with the Fury's Edge because it's not reliant on the Fury's Edge's stats itself, which is good because the Fury's Edge's stats are pretty bad. Gap Closer is probably actually worse than not having Gap Closer, than having a blank slot. So, because it increases the distance at which you're not able to safely deflect projectiles. Whereas Quick Strike does the opposites. They mostly counterbalance each other, but generally speaking, I would rather have Quick Strike and not have Gap Closer, even if there was the option to have both. But I do think Frenzy is probably if you were taking one, I'd probably go Frenzy when I'm using the Fury's Edge, just because its lunge distance is tiny anyway. Anyway, that's it for the Fury's Edge guide. There won't be any more weapon or suit guides for a while because I have covered all weapons or suits, so you can go check out the previous guides if you haven't already. I will probably be putting out more like quick tips and maybe some short guides, but it won't be quite as regular as it has been the last month and a half or so. But anyway, I shall see you next time.